today is the Parliament's winter session coming to a close. The fate of the government's economic reforms agenda hangs in the balance. Chaos ensuring every single session this winter has been deadlocked. The insurance bill and the coal bill particularly have been held up. Priyal joins us from the capital with what we can continue watching out for. Priyal, as the deadlock continues, does it look like there could be any hope?
Well, the low numbers in Rajya Sabha has come to haunt the government quite literally, given the way the winter session has progressed and the entire parliament and the process, legislative business being stalled owing to opposition standing firm on the ground of the Prime Minister to address the issue and make a statement as far as the conversion is concerned. While the colleagues of the Prime Minister have tried to make the statements in the Parliament, but the opposition is not backing. And on the last day, therefore, a lot is at stake as far as the government's reforms agenda is concerned. The insurance bill, which the select committee, despite having given the approval for the increase in the FDI of the proposal of the increase in the FDI, remains to be discussed in the Rajya Sabha. Also, the coal ordinance, the coal bill, which is to give the sanctity as far as the coal ordinance is concerned, government already in works to do the plan B, given that the Rajya Sabha is yet to give its nod to that crucial bill that has to make its way for the coal auction process. As we pick up that the government is already planning the ordinance route and repromulgation of the ordinance as far as coal is concerned. The Companies Act, which was to give in much relief, the amendment there in terms of related party has already been restricted to Lok Sabha, is expected to is part of the legislative business as of today, but remains a question mark as to whether the opposition will at all let the House to function, and whether the reforms agenda that the government has been pushing for really is met with a logjam that has been plaguing the Parliament and the House and the Rajya Sabha more importantly.
All right, so with the winter session then looking like it will be washed out, has the Modi government missed out a crucial opportunity to push through key reforms? And are markets concerned about the government losing its reform momentum? To discuss that, I'm being joined by both Deven Choksey of Choksey Securities, as well as Rohit Prasad, Associate Professor of Economics at MDI. Gentlemen, appreciate you taking the time this morning. And Deven, I want to start by asking you, today is of course a very crucial day in terms of all these bills which are up in front of Parliament. What's the market reaction going to be? What's the market reading going to be ahead of that, especially if we don't see much action, if we don't see these bills getting passed through?
Yeah, good morning. Well, I think market is certainly, keeping track of this particular bills passing through, and obviously I think the developments which are happening in the Parliament is also being noticed. However, what is more important is the progress made in this direction, because the Cabinet Committee has approved the bills, both insurance bill as well as on the GST bill, which has been tabled in the Parliament also. So to a greater extent, the hopes are that these bills will get through at some point of time. Maybe if today is not the day on which it will get through everything, maybe the next session in which you would probably see the bills getting through. And it is a significant amount of opportunity for a country, particularly because you would have a larger amount of inflow of money coming in, and the newer businesses would get listed in form of insurance into the marketplace. So this is once again a very positive thing, because it could attract new investors into the market, and market certainly wants to see the participation of insurance business in its overall capitalization program. And GST, of course, the rollout has been decided for 2016 April, and should it get through, then in such situation promises to bring up the GDP growth in subsequent years. So to a greater extent, market looks at this positive, and I believe that a larger amount of investment has already been lined up because of this possibility of these bills getting through by some of the large corporates and the promoters. So I think it would be really positive when the bill gets through from the Parliament.
Okay, so that's a very optimistic note on which we're starting this conversation. Rohit Prasad, I want to come to you next and talk about whether this is really a missed opportunity. On one hand, you have the Prime Minister Modi, who's sticking to his stance. On the other, you have the opposition, which is also sticking to his stance. Is this a big missed opportunity, the way you see it?
Yes, definitely. I think it is a missed opportunity because the whole key is to move fast on reforms. The previous government was faulted for policy paralysis, and missing one session of parliament amounts to slowing down of possible growth. And I think the message here is that the BJP will have to coordinate much better with the members of the Sangh Parivar in order to make sure that attention doesn't get diverted from development. Because remember, the opposition right now is really stuck between a rock and a hard place, and they're going to clutch at every straw that they get in order to be able to make their presence felt. And I must say that while some of the noise that we've been hearing was not the responsibility of the government itself has also offered some straws to the opposition in terms of the statement of the foreign minister, the Sadhvi, etc. And so the government needs to get its act together and be much more coordinated going ahead. Otherwise, it is going to slow down reforms.
But Rohit, I want to break this down in terms of what is in front of Parliament and GST. True, it would only have been, at least we're only looking for it to be introduced. But if I can go so far as to call it as one of the most crucial amendments, or the most crucial in terms of reforms in front of the government, what are you watching out for? Are you hopeful that it will still meet the 2016 guideline?
I certainly hope it will, because getting a common market going in India is absolutely key for getting a lot of efficiencies into the system. Right now, there's lots of bottlenecks on account of the different taxes which are applicable in different state jurisdictions. So I think that it's absolutely key that the GST gets passed, and one can just keep one's fingers crossed and hope that it will get passed. Basically, there is unanimity, broad agreement between both the opposition as well as the government on the GST. There are certain things which need to get wrinkled out in terms of revenues to states on liquor and other certain other items. But there is a broad agreement on this, and if the government plays its cards correctly and manages parliamentary affairs well, then I do hope that they will be able to meet their deadline.
Okay, Rohit, just a quick last word with you in terms of coal. It's looking likely that the government will bring about an ordinance early January, is what my colleagues have picked up from their sources. Do you think that is possible? Because we have seen some precedents in the past of such important bills being pushed through the ordinance route. What are you watching out for?
I'm not sure that pushing it through an ordinance route is going to do much good to the investment climate in this sector, because the investors have already had a bad experience in terms of their allocations being cancelled, and now to expect that they will invest in the hope that the bill will get passed in future might be a little too much. So I'm not sure that the ordinance route is going to give us a good via media into the coal auction.
Deven, I want to bring you back into this conversation at this point, and since we have you with us and since we are counting down to 2015, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you're watching out for in terms of a level or a range for the markets.
Well, I think 2015 would be interesting year. It is starting with a kind of a premises that you have a lower cost of crude oil in the international market, and the benefit of it is coming into India. In a full year of operations, I think the country would have a very comfortable position both at current account deficit as well as the fiscal deficit. So the stress on the government finances would be less. And the second biggest theme, I think, which would probably help the country would be the possibility of the cost structure coming down, because of, I think, even the interest rates likely to come down in coming times. So both crude oil has a potential to bring down the cost structure. At the same time, I think interest rate coming down would kickstart the economic momentum and probably the growth therein. So certainly 2015 promises to be, I think, a year wherein you are likely to see the benefit of some of these structural changes which are coming into the economy. We believe that, I think, respective sectors and within this, I think, the companies could possibly be the bigger beneficiaries, and that is a potential which we are seeing as far as attracting new investment in the market is concerned. Apart from bringing in the investment into the sectors like railways, the defense and the insurance, I think these are the two key themes which we are looking at as far as I think 2015 investment is concerned in the markets.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the early indications you are getting in terms of a BJP win as far as Jharkhand goes and BJP and PDP as far as Jammu and Kashmir goes, Deven. If there is a decisive win for the BJP government in both these states, how's the market going to read into that? What's the market reaction in your opinion going to be?
In fact, I think it would be for a country, it would be I think quite positive, because a state in which I think the government is operating, if it is aligned with the objectives where the country's objectives are at the central level, probably I think the growth could happen much faster, and otherwise I think the majority of the states which are lagging behind, which is where I think India hasn't failed in progress. I think if this government comes into power, I would think that I think this is going to be a more powerful thing to happen. Market certainly is looking forward to a smooth transition as far as I think the BJP-led government is concerned and operating in different states. Key reforms like GST and all I think are getting implemented in times to come, and that's where I think the common government between center and the state could make things much easier. So certainly market is counting on each of these possibilities, and probably I think would remain watchful on the developments happening on the political front.
Deven, a quick last word as we're ending this conversation, and I want to talk about crude. We've seen after a smart rally, we're seeing volatility coming back as far as crude prices go. What's the kind of advice you're giving your retail investors?
Well, it looks like that I think the crude prices are not going to go up in hurry. There may be some kind of a bounce coming up in the crude oil prices, but I would rather look at I think the stability in the crude oil prices in the $60–65 per barrel kind of a range. If that crude is average I think in $60–65 per range, then in such situation the entire cost structure in the economy is coming down, and at the same time I think the corporate profitability is promises to improve I think in coming times. We tell investors this point of time that the crude is not going to go down badly either. At the same time, I think is unlikely to go up in hurry. So if it is stabilizing around this level, certainly the investment should be done in some of the quality areas, particularly in the areas where I think the influence of energy cost is higher, maybe in the commodity space. On a selective basis, I think one could look at some of the cement companies I think for investing into the portfolios. Along with that, of course, I think we are telling investors that I think with the cost structure coming down, banking sector should be favorably placed, because the rate of interest also would come down due to the lower borrowing of the government from the state financials. So to a greater extent, all of these issues are likely to have positive impact, and I think that's where I think selective buying into the investment stock, investment stock into the portfolio could give a smarter return to investors going forward.